The Crypt Interviews in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.
You're listening to The Crypt, and this week's special guest is independent filmmaker David Chaudoir. So you're very welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me on, Rita. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, David, before we talk about your films, I'd like to talk about your career in television. I believe you've been working in television for over 25 years.
That's right. I went to art school. I went to a relatively famous art school in London called St Martin's, and it was kind of famous for the fact that the Sex Pistols had played their first gig there, and a number of different quite famous fashion designers had it was famous for its fashion school. But it had a film course which was called the Fine Art Film Course, and I went there thinking that because I'd loved film and I always wanted to make films, and I was making films as a kid, and I thought, I'm joining a film school, but actually it was an art film school, and they were very, very badly underfunded, and they didn't really make anything. But it being an art film school, you could get away with murder in terms of, you could film a bucket of rainwater or something like that. And they would accept this as, a great work of art. So after about a year and a half, I thought, I really would like to be able to support myself and get a job at the end of it. So I transferred internally within the art school to do motion graphics. It wasn't called motion graphics then, but design for television, design for film, on the stuff you see on screen. And I was very, very lucky in 1990 that I went straight from the art school to getting a job in a production company called Diverse. And they were set up with money from Channel 4. And they made programs for Channel 4 and BBC Two, and I was very, very lucky to be working on programs which were going out on Channel 4 and BBC Two, and one of the more famous programs that they were involved with was a television program called Moving Pictures, which was a cinema program. Every week, these producers would go off to Los Angeles and interview people who were coming up, and I remember one of the programs was about this young filmmaker called Tarantino. And so we saw, a bit of Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that. And they interviewed Tarantino. And also a friend of mine, who I became friendly with, a producer who worked on the show, who went to Los Angeles and saw the old guys like American International Pictures, which was run by this guy called Zarkov, who made all these sort of monster movies and B movies. He was like the king of B movies. Yeah. So it was a fantastic, that's where I started. And I've worked for 25 years in television. I sort of graduated. I moved from just doing title sequences for TV to doing things like channel identities, like I designed a TV channel in Germany, and I designed ITV2, things like that. So, I've worked for many years in it. And then about 3-4 years ago, I joined Fox TV and National Geographic, and I was head of design there. And that's when I got to work on things like The Wire and American Horror Story and The Walking Dead.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so they had some great programs, they had great content, and occasionally I was allowed to do promos for them. And I did, one of my stories was that I did a promotion for The Walking Dead, and it was a very low budget thing that we made ourselves. And there was a girl from the office, we got a special effects person in, they made her up as a zombie. And I made this trailer for The Walking Dead for the UK, for Fox TV in the UK. And it got leaked online. And I didn't know what Twitter was in 2012. I hadn't really engaged in social media. And it went viral on Twitter. And AMC, who owned the show, and Gail Ann Hurd, who's the producer, who was married to James Cameron and produced The Terminator and Aliens. Yeah. She put out an official, this has got nothing to do with AMC or The Walking Dead. And Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead, said, oh, it's very nice, but it isn't one of ours, kind of thing. It's not official. And yeah, so I had my 15 seconds of fame on Twitter for that one.
It sounds like a very enjoyable
So
job.
yeah, I've worked. Yes, I think the thing is because I've worked in motion graphics for 25 years. I've seen the industry change, and I didn't always just stay within motion graphics. I did things like, I always wanted to be a director, but I just never knew how, really. I kind of always thought maybe somebody would tap me on the shoulder and say, oh, we like what you're doing, here's a script. But the world doesn't work like that. So I directed music videos as well, and I directed commercials, and I directed music videos for bands like Athlete and Star Sailor and Graham Coxon. So I got some skills together, and I met some lovely people working within the industry. Yeah, I started writing when I was at Fox, and because I thought, I had this dawning realization that, which is stupid because I knew it all along, really, that I had to do stuff for myself, and the only person who's going to help me make a film is if I get off my arse and do it myself. So I started writing whilst I was commuting to work, and I wrote an 18th century ghost story called Talk of the Devil. And I was working at an advertising agency, and I came across an actor who's relatively famous, and I gave him the script and said, would you be interested? And he arranged a table reading round at his house one evening, and he invited some actors. And it was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. I was sweating buckets, basically, having these professional actors read my script. And then I thought, right, okay, I've got to get some money together. And it became very, very apparent quite quickly that an 18th century ghost story is going to cost me a bloody fortune.
I can imagine.
So I started writing in a more contemporary vein, but I wrote something that could be set in today, which was where Bad Acid came in. And I'd also written some features. I've been to this thing called the London Screenwriters Festival, which is this festival where people who want to get into screenwriting go, and they have lectures and things like that. And then the next year came around, and I saw these people, people I'd made brief acquaintances with, who were going back the next year, and I thought I'd rather spend the £400, whatever it was, to go to this event and actually attempt to make my own film. Because although I find directing easy, I find, because I've been around film crews, I don't find it intimidating. But the sort of intimidating thing for me is the script any good? And that's, I think anybody who's creative is basically not a terribly self-confident person, because you're always, is this any good? You rewrite it, you change things. But anyway, so that was my journey. For 25 years, I did motion graphics, I did title sequences for television and identities for television channels and music videos and some commercials. But always at the back of my mind wanted to write and direct, and as I said, it's sort of the realization that nobody's going to give you a hand up. You've got to do it yourself, and I think that, as your show has proved, there's a lot of people at the moment who are doing it themselves.
Exactly, and there's so much talent out there. It's amazing.
It is, and it's really funny because I made this film almost in complete isolation, in terms of I hadn't connected with any of the horror community, as it were. And the first thing that I did was, when the film was made, I had an 18-minute version of Bad Acid. And I went to the London Horror Society with Sarah, my wife, and we had a screening of the film before I put it into any festivals or anything like that. And I met all these people. Nicholas Vince was there, the chap from Hellraiser. Yeah. Scott Lias was there. Lovely guy. Who you've had on your show. Scott was actually running the technical side of the screening, and lots of other people there. A chap called Mal Jutley, who later reviewed the film for the London Horror Society website. So that I sort of walked into this ready-made community that I didn't really knew existed, and through that I've met and talked to virtually or online or Facebook or whatever, Twitter. There's this whole sort of network of people out there doing exactly the same thing. This sounds terribly arrogant. It isn't meant to be, but maybe we are the next sort of wave of filmmakers who will be making stuff for the cinema in 10 years' time or something like that, you know. And it's quite exciting seeing. It's like I think that Katie Bonham's. I saw her on Facebook that she's recceing a new film. So you're now along the journey with these people. And exactly. Scott Lias has just done a crowdfunding for his film that was written by Tony Sands, who interviewed me on the UK Horror Scene YouTube channel. So all these people are connected.
And it's brilliant. And for me, it's quite exciting to be along with you on the journey, because I can't wait until all you guys get to do your first feature film, because your shorts have been amazing. I reviewed Bad Acid for you this week, and I have to say,
that's right,
absolutely loved it. I thought it was a brilliant short. But for those listeners now who don't know about it, could you give a little summary of the plot?
Yeah, Bad Acid. I'll give you a brief sort of journey into how I got there. I used to love magic and tricks and conjuring and stuff like that, and I never really liked the persona of the magician as always a bit of a smarty pants. He's always a bit of sort of a look at me character, and especially people on TV I found particularly annoying. And then I sort of came back to magic and found that it could kind of move on. I'd sort of dropped it as a child. And I came back to it a few years ago, and obviously now everything's online. So there were these forums that I looked at, and I was intrigued by this branch of magic called Bizarre Magic. And Bizarre Magic is a performance style which is very much more sort of supernatural. People do conjuring tricks, but they sometimes in a jokey way, sometimes in a serious way, suggest that there are spirits at work, or there's a much more story-based element to a trick. It's like the very first trick my father showed me. He's not a magician or a conjurer, he's a businessman, but he had one trick, which is his stock in trade, which is he took 4 cards, 4 kings, and he put them in a deck of cards, and he said, the queen is somewhere in the building, this deck of cards represents the building, and these 4 kings are trying to find the princess and rescue her. One goes in the bottom, one goes in the middle, one goes high up to the top, and the other one goes right to the very top. And he put the 4 cards into the deck, and then he said, but the fire spread, so they all ran up to the top and rescued the princess. And then he turned over the 4 cards at the top, which I'd seen him put into the deck in various places, and there they were on the top. And I think that story-based magic is so much more powerful than here, pick a card, put it in the deck, it's at the top again. So this sort of kind of connected with me, the whole Bizarre Magic thing. And I started researching it, and I found a hypnotist called Anthony Jacquin, who is an extraordinary British hypnotist who incorporates hypnotism into his magic. So he will put you into a trance, and then he'll take your wallet, or ask you to take your wallet out of your pocket, look at your credit card, memorize the last 4 digits of your credit card, you put it back in your pocket, and then he says you won't remember the last minute. And then he'll say, I'm going to guess the numbers of your credit card. And obviously the audience is an accomplice into what's just happened. But the person on stage, to my mind, I thought, my God, that's like real magic.
Yeah.
Imagine if you could see that, if you were that participant, if you were that person being hypnotized. And he, like all magicians these days, they don't release books anymore. They release DVDs. And he released a DVD on how to incorporate hypnotism into a magic performance. And he put this young hypnotist under. And then he said, look, now you're coming around. Can you see the genie behind me? There's a genie behind me. And you saw this young chap looking up. And he was hallucinating. This guy had induced a hallucination. And then he said, and now the genie's changing. He's got long teeth and fangs, and his fingernails are growing, and you saw the young chap sort of recoil in the chair in horror, and that was the seed of the story for me. And I spoke to Anthony Jacquin since he got in touch, because I put it out there that he inspired the film, and he said that's the one and only time he's ever done a genie in his act. So I wrote this story about a hypnotist who is one of those annoying people, one of those annoying magicians who, as I said before, people who are the sort of look at me characters, the people who demand attention. And the attention had gone, the fame had gone away. So Marvin Masklin is this washed-up TV hypnotist who once had fame and fortune, and now his star has fallen, and he's bumping along, performing in these working men's clubs and drinking clubs, and he's desperate to get it back. And one night he loses his plastic prop, the genie lamp. And he goes to a friend who has this Babylonian lamp with a strange provenance, that it was owned by this old rock and roller who died in mysterious circumstances. And within the lamp are these tabs of LSD. Not that I would take one personally, but if it had a bloody great pentangle printed on it. Exactly. But anyway, such is the idiocy of my main character that he downs one, and he sees this vision. He's asked by this strange figure, "What do you want?" And he says, "I want my fame back." And it's the quintessential "be careful what you wish for" storyline, that Marvin gets his wish in the end, but not quite the way he wanted it. And, it's kind of inspired by I loved it. I grew up in Britain. I don't know whether did you get BBC One and Two in Southern Ireland?
Yeah, we did.
In the 1970s in the UK, we had these double bills.
Hammer Horror Night.
Yeah, on it was either Friday night or Saturday night, and they would show an old Universal or RKO horror film from the 1940s or 50s, and then later on, round about midnight, they would show a more contemporary film, whether it was Theatre of Blood, From Beyond the Grave, things like that. Yeah. And as much as to be honest, I found the early ones a bit boring, but the contemporary ones are absolutely brilliant. And the worst thing was that my mother would lurk around the door because she knew the more contemporary film was coming on, and I think she wanted to preserve my morals just in case I saw some naked female flesh, of which in the 1970s there was quite a lot on display, with the Twins of Evil and Vampire Circus and all that kind of stuff. So she would be there, she would be the guardian of my morals, standing by the door, and I'd be thinking, please, no boobs, no boobs. And so I grew up watching these things, and what I think I loved about them was that sort of slightly old-fashioned morality of, you do something wrong and eventually you pay for it. And my main character, Marvin Masklin, is a very narcissistic character. He gets his fame in the end. As I said, I don't want to give I should imagine people have joined the dots already, Rita.
Well, it's definitely worth watching. When you're making a short film, you have such a short amount of time to make an impact. Your casting is so important. And I think you chose a fantastic cast for this. So could you tell me a bit about the casting process?
Yes. I got a producer called Suki Richardson, and I wanted to pay everybody. I didn't want anybody. I know a lot of filmmakers, there's so little money out there to make films, but I raised enough money so that everybody would get paid, every technician working on it, and every actor would get paid. And we held a casting in London with a woman, a casting director called Andrea. I can't remember her second name. Anyway, Andrea did the casting, and she got together a group of actors. And the talent out there is extraordinary, because I don't know how many actors you can name on, you can probably name on both hands a series of male actors, but there are hundreds out there who are very, very talented and are either they're doing commercials or they're doing bits and bobs of theatre, and they're as good as anybody that you'll see on television or a film. Anyway, I had this casting, and at the same time, a friend of mine, Adam, had said, a friend of mine, I think, has read your script, this chap called Tristan. And I was aware of Tristan because after I'd written that film, Talk of the Devil, the 18th century one, he had read that as well. And he was very keen to be involved. He'd been in Ghost Stories, the Andy Nyman's theatre production, which is also in itself an anthology horror, but on stage. And he'd been one of the main cast members on that. So, and he loves horror anyway. And he kind of said, look, could I come along to the cast? He rang me up out of the blue. And I said, sure, come along. The lead character was a much older character, closer to my age, sort of, I'm late 40s. And so I rewrote a couple of things when I saw Tristan's performance, because he was the most interesting. He came in character. He'd gotten a black suit from somewhere. He came in and he talked in the Yorkshire accent that I wanted. And there were other people closer to the right age. Yeah. But I thought, look, sod it. I want an interesting performance. And by God, that bloke can act. He is wonderful. And just things like, when we were doing close-up on stage, in the trip sequence, he's bowing to an imaginary audience. And there were real tears in his eyes. Now, I didn't see him sniffing an onion before he did that. And it's like he was just genuinely outstanding. And also Madeline Bowyer. I never know whether it's Bowyer or Bowyer. I do apologise, Madeline, if you're listening to this. But she had done something like 5 years or 4 years, I think, in Emmerdale on British TV, and is just a bloody amazing actress. She is so convincing, and she plays Marvin's long-suffering manager stroke sort of assistant, and she was just fantastic. And then all the other people who came to the casting were equally brilliant. And it was, when you hear your own words that you've written coming out of actors' mouths and it sounds convincing, you think, oh right, this is going to work. So that was I told you I'd talk too much, Rita.
You do not. That's what it's all about, the interview. It's about you, so talk away.
So it was a casting session, and that's how. And so Tristan kind of bypassed the casting director because he was a friend of a friend, it wasn't in any way some sort of nepotistic act for me to cast him. I had two people in mind, and he was one of them, and I thought, I want to give him a shot because I think that he is the most interesting person that I've met. And even though he wasn't the right age, so that's why I plumped for him. And he has proven to be absolutely brilliant.
And then is Bad Acid doing the festival circuit at the moment?
Well, I've applied for various festivals on the Bad Acid Film website. There's a list of all the ones that I've applied for. If you know anything about short film and the way the whole festival thing works, you get a lot more rejections than you do acceptances. But it's been accepted to 3 so far. It's an expensive process. I'm broke at the moment, so I haven't paid for any more to be submitted yet.
That's the good thing about social media as well, for helping you get the word out and everything.
Yeah, well, I hadn't done social media until a couple of years ago, and I only recently joined, I think about 3 months ago, joined Facebook, because somebody said, look, you've really got to get on there.
Yeah.
And as you say, 1, for getting the word out, and 2, for meeting other people who are doing the same thing.
Not many people I would have known before I started doing the Crypt would be into horror, and it's fantastic now to be part of this amazing community.
It is. It's fantastic. Yeah. And I think that, as we sort of said slightly earlier, I'm looking forward to seeing where people are going with their own projects, at a later date.
Exactly. Well, then another short that I reviewed for you was A Jonas and Aphrodite. Now, I love this. It was a short film, but it was a monologue. Now, I'd imagine that's not an easy task to write or indeed perform, when you have to hold the attention of the viewer. And it gripped me from the start to the end. I really enjoyed it.
Good. When I was working on Bad Acid, I kind of felt guilty that I hadn't given Madeleine enough to do in some respects. She only appears in a couple of scenes with dialogue. And I had an idea in my head at the time. I live in a row of houses, 3 houses on this lane in Berkshire. And there are some, what I'd call probably millionaires' houses on the lane as well. Yeah. And I kind of had this story about some neighbours of ours, and who have now since gone. And I thought, when I was talking to Madeleine, I had this germ of an idea, and I said, look, I'd really like to write something just for you. Would you be interested? And she said, well, look, when you've written it, send it to me. And about 6 months later, I sent it to her, and she said, I'll do it. I find writing slightly difficult sometimes, just in terms of sort of motivating myself to write. And because I've written a couple of feature films, they were quite a long slog. So the shorts have been slightly easier. But it's when you get a voice in your head, and because I knew how Madeleine talks and how when she does a Yorkshire accent, I could hear her voice in my head as I wrote it. So I'd grown up with Alan Bennett's Talking Head series on the TV, which is a series of monologues. And when I started writing this, I was very tempted to look at one. And I thought, no, I mustn't do that, because I mustn't be coloured by what the style that he's written in. So I wrote this thing, and it was, as I said, it was like tuning a radio that I just heard Madeleine's voice, and it just came out in a couple of days or so. And then the joy of watching that film is watching it with an audience, because there are certain things that I didn't even realise were funny, and the audience laughs at.
Yeah.
So
the dark humour.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the performance of it, Madeleine learnt everything completely. She had it down pat. She took 3 months to learn it. And she rehearsed with a theatre director in London, a friend of hers. And we had, I lost the location like 2 days before. I wanted it located in a room that you could think was an art therapy room. Yeah. So that at the end, I give away where she is. So what I wanted her is in an art room with her painting and dipping a paintbrush into water. And you saw that the water was turning red. And you saw her painting like a flower on the or a moon or something like that on a piece of paper. And I lost this location. It was a school local to me, which I was a former pupil, and it was all wrong because they wanted to have a chaperone there. And I thought, Christ, if they hear the lesbian bit, they're going to call the headmaster and shut us down. So believe it or not, that was shot at Dowie Abbey. My wife Sarah and I were married at Dowie Abbey in 1990, and in the gardens where there's an ever dwindling number of monks who live there, all getting old and dying off one by one. But in the gardens of the monastery of the abbey is this knackered old greenhouse, and I was driving around looking for locations, and I said to one of the priests, look, do you think I could go in here? I want to shoot this film. And he said, yeah, go ahead. You know, I haven't showed it to him yet.
Oh my God, a priest of all people.
Well, I think that if he did watch it, he'd say, well, you know, there's nothing comes of worshipping the devil.
There's a lesson to be learned.
Exactly. It's really funny, isn't it, that the Catholic Church got behind The Exorcist, saying, you know, it proved that evil existed. So yeah. So anyway, that's where I shot it. And Madeline, she turned up she had to leave London at something ridiculous at 4 or 5 in the morning, and she came down by train. We live an hour outside of London. And we got into this greenhouse. She got into the outfit. She did her own makeup. The cameraman appeared about 9 o'clock or something, or 10. And then we shot it in, I think the most we did on one scene was 3 takes, but we just broke it up into the various different bits. And as you say, she is just so engaging anyway. And the way I wanted the information to come across was very, very slowly. So you learn about her attitudes.
Yeah.
You learn about the kind of person that she is and her beliefs. And then you slowly find how her whole life has unraveled by becoming involved with these neighbours of hers who have some kind of sort of pagan thing going on. And as I said, it's wonderful watching it now with an audience, because especially people over a certain age, not a younger audience doesn't seem to get it, but people who've been married a long time seem to.
Well, do you know what? I loved the twists and the turns in the tale, because at the start, you'd never think it was going to end up where it ended up. It was so good. And you really felt like, I don't know, you felt like you were sitting having a cup of tea with someone, listening to them telling you this mad story, like, you know, it was so good.
Yeah. And what was, I don't know whether you want to wind up soon, Rita, but one thing after I'd written that and we'd shot it, and I thought, I am going to go back and watch Alan Bennett and just to satisfy my own curiosity that I haven't sort of completely ripped the guy off. And I watched 2 films, and they're actually quite dark. One of them had Julie Walters in, and it was the story of a woman who was pretty much not under house arrest, but sort of self-imposed house arrest. She didn't want to go out because her husband had been arrested in connection with a series of multiple murders. And it turns out that she's been complicit in help, not knowingly, but helping him hide some clothes which have got blood stains, and her husband is some kind of serial killer. And I thought, my God, you know, this is like, I thought that mine was quite dark, but mine, I don't think Bennett would ever write anything supernatural. There's a slight supernatural element to mine.
Yeah.
But here, you know, these are quite dark subjects, and I think that I like that about the 1970s films, that they seem to be sort of like ordinary people. And that's what I really like to write, is ordinary people getting into some stupid situation, you know, invariably supernatural or, you know, horror based. But as you can tell from what you've seen, I'm not really into gore. I'm not really into, you know, violence. I like the chills to be a little bit more subtle. So they're slightly on the sort of tales the unexpected end of things, rather than, you know, people's heads being lopped off. However, I do have a script.
However,
where 3 people have their heads chopped off and there are demons running around. So.
And will that is that for another short, or do you have any plans for a feature?
Well, I've written 2 feature films, and one of them needs extensive rewriting. And I've written about 5 shorts now. And my plan is if people like Bad Acid and like Dennis and Aphrodite, and if somehow it's easier to raise money for the next film, I've written 2 films that I think could slot into an anthology. And the anthology that the wrapper, the device that holds all these stories together, is called Horror Cells, as in CELLS.
Yeah.
And it's about a police station that's being decommissioned and closing down. And a duty solicitor, if you get arrested in the UK, you have to be seen by a duty solicitor who has to take a statement with you with a police officer. So the story is this duty solicitor goes to this police station, which is closing at midnight, and she interviews these 4 or 5 suspects who are being interviewed by the police, and each one has a different tale to tell as to why they're there. Yeah, I've written 2 of those stories, and one of them is quite cheap to film, and one of them is a lot more expensive. I've got a friend in America who, part of the wider horror community, who has indicated that he might want to help co-fund one of these films. And then, the eternal battle for anybody working as a short indie filmmaker or whatever is finding the bloody money, Rita.
Exactly, isn't it? It's a nightmare.
Where is that pot of gold?
Exactly. I tell you, I really can't wait to see what you make next, because I really, really enjoyed those 2 shorts. And as I said to Scott, I'm always so worried when somebody says to me, will you review my shorts for me? Because I always think, oh my God, if they're bad, how am I going to say it to them? Do you know what I mean? So I should be so relieved when they're good. I've been lucky now and I haven't had a bad one yet.
That's very kind of you. And I work very, very hard to try and bring high production value to everything that I do. And, the fact that, there's a fantastic sound mix on Bad Acid. The lighting cameraman, Andy Horner, has been working for many years in commercials and music videos and film himself. Yeah. So, I hope that the writing, matches the production quality.
Oh, it certainly does. And
thank you.
If anybody wants to follow you online, do you have any pages for the movies, or is your...
Yes, I have badacidfilm.com.
Okay.
So that's all one word, badacidfilm.com. And I have my Twitter handle is @ and then as in the woods or the tree or something. And then my surname is spelled CHAUDOIR. So that's @the Chaudoir. And that's where I pump out all the information about what's happening with Bad Acid and, trying to get reviews. And
people can keep up with everything there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, David, I've enjoyed chatting with you so much. And as I said, when your next projects are done, you'll definitely have to send them on to me, because I really look forward to seeing them.
Thank you, Rita. I look forward to that as well.
The Crypt Interviews, in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.